Welcome to AyAyAyAi, another episode where we discuss artificial intelligence and machine learning from different perspective. And today we will engage with a data subject matter expert. And if you know what machine learning is, you know it's nothing without data. So looking forward to speaking with Amith Nikam on this topic. We have a variety of discussions that we'll try to cover, but it's such a short period of time to cover a semester long worth of discussion. So, without further ado, Amit, please make a quick introduction. But uh, feel free to expand on your subject matter expertise because I think these are the subject matter expertise that we need in order to be successful in machine learning AI development.
All right, excellent. Great to be here with you, Asif. I've always admired the work that you and your partners have done, specifically around upskilling military veterans. And first and foremost, thank you for your service with the Air Force. So, my full name is Amith Nikam. I live in Delaware with my wife of 20 years and two boys, 17 and 13. Over the past 26 years, I've implemented ERP, specifically SAP, for various customers, US Army, United States Postal Service, DuPont, and a couple other commercial enterprises. I'm what's called as a CETA. I believe it stands for Systems Engineering and Technical Support, contract support for the U.S. Army. So I'm not a Army civilian. I'm not obviously a uniform. I'm not in uniform service. Never had the pleasure of doing that. However, I do support the Army in building and deploying and sustaining ERP solutions. Um, so I'm also a key architect in a new initiative that the Army is starting to converge a group of large ERPs into one following a composable ERP architecture. In terms of education background, I hold a master's degree in information systems and technology management. The second part is going to be important for our conversation, managing technology. So I'm by no means an expert in machine learning or AI for sure. What I do specialize in is to manage technology, how to go grab what's out there, corral it, and then deploy it into the known known for exploitation. Technology has to be exploited the right way. So, for example, I was instrumental in bringing in memory computing for the Army.
Mhm.
Now it's a fact, right? In memory computing, no big deal. I mean, if you don't use it, you're behind the curve. 10 years ago, that was not the case. It was
That's
new technology. There was not much trust in it, especially in a much more conservative environment like the DoD. So there are various other examples like that. But as of now, the challenge or opportunity in front of me is harnessing generative AI and see what opportunities that could bring within the DoD landscape. The commercial world is doing a great job of using it within the DoD landscape. And again, by no means an expert, but my opportunity here is to bring in something, a, a technology revolution that is fundamentally central to the fourth industrial revolution that we are in, bring it into a defense business systems and help the men and women who put their life in harm's way, right? Bring them this additional capability that people like you and me outside can
that's
exploit
right.
day in and day out, right?
Right. 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 Yeah, I think there's if I may call the data lifecycle and data supply chain, right?
Hmm.
And when you discuss it from the method of if you touch this data for this purposes, and there's somebody at the end of the range, at the end point is a military soldier, airman,
Hmm.
marine, and their life is being impacted by that. You have a different sort of purpose in life at that point, right? Because
Absolutely.
when you touch the data and it ends up in the shop floor, and the shop floor machine is able to uh, do bigger and better things, you have one purpose. But when the purpose is to give an ammunition or give somebody the the opportunity to fight better or do it more proficiently with less human casualties, you think of it differently. You put some sincerity that otherwise probably can get lost in translation. This
Mhm.
one, you cannot afford that. And I think this is a good chance for us to talk about future trends in generative AI, which everybody is pretty hyped about. But it doesn't leave off the conversation about AI in general.
Mhm.
Generative AI is one of the tools that will get us the rest of the tools. But specifically in defense, it makes a huge difference that generative AI is what defense calls the a conservative approach that is least risky, right? So let's talk about that a little bit more. What are you thinking? What's your thought process there for generative AI? Some of the use cases maybe, and how that impacts the defense industry.
Yeah. So I don't know if the defense community sees this as the least risky. If you look at all the task forces that have been stood up, while there is extremely high ambition of tapping this,
Right,
there's a, uh, there's a significant guarded approach. Having said that, it could have been worse. I give you that. Um, the question in the defense community is not why you should not do it.
right.
It's more about how to do it right,
That's
which is a huge step in the right direction. And again, oh, you know what? Let me get go through my disclaimers, right?
right.
So all the views and the conversations that we are about to have are my own. It does not reflect those of the army or my clients or my customers.
That's
Um, so yeah, now that that disclosure is out of the way, um, and most of my opinions are informed opinions, but there could be some opinions which are ill-informed, and I'm
right.
okay to be corrected or informed upon. So yeah, going back, so there is a significantly guarded approach on how to exploit generative AI, and this is definitely one of those things. If you're not doing it, you're already behind, right? In terms of trends, so I see a wide gamut. From a business systems point of view, there is the emphasis on trying to get the AI augmented workforce and save money and improve productivity and this and that. And on the other end, very specific military applications, especially in the Intel community. So those are very specific. And on the left hand side are the typical generative AI, generate code, clean up code, generate documentation or summarization. Uh, if you just have to look at a couple of DoD acquisition or military policy documents, you won't make it to the last page. So what if this thing could summarize and tell you what is what?
Right.
I see a lot of low hanging fruit applications right now, not just in within the DoD, but the vendors and the companies that serve the DoD, where they're automatically able to generate statements of work or respond to RFPs and things like that. Is it 100% solution? No, but
That's
you get it to 80%.
right.
Then you do your magic sauce, remaining 20%.
That's
Saves
right.
you a lot of time and effort on those. In terms of future trends, which we'll talk about more, but what spikes my interest is this whole concept of edge LLM, um, where there's a few leading companies out there trying to explore this. Instead of using all the data and have your LLM parse through it and hence get into security concerns of, wait a minute, where is all my data going? What
That's right.
if there are smaller but similarly capable LLMs at the edge? And when I say the edge, it doesn't have to be a mobile device. It's within a network. In the future, it could be on a mobile device or on a sensor somewhere. Now
That's
you're not pushing data through the pipeline somewhere and worried what happens to it. There are localized decisions possible and localized content consumption that's possible. That is definitely sparking my curiosity and interest, out of a selfish reason, because that addresses quite a few of the security concerns that I'm working through.
that's
So I'll
right.
pause for your thoughts on that one.
No, exactly. Like I think when you research these topics for long enough, and I think you have, is that you come to these conclusions that it has to be edge, it has to be localized device. And if you just think of it from a perspective of leadership, you train your soldiers, you train your airmen, you train your staff to do the work, but your staff doesn't necessarily see it the perspective that you see it in. So when it comes to just in time training, the way to make that just in time training a reality is to have a device that already has a large language model built into it. And that large language model doesn't have to be necessarily relied on the Starlink internet or internet that's
Mhm.
fiber wire. It's literally working inside of your tank out in the field where you have an iPad and that iPad has a large language model built into it. And you're providing just in time training, not necessarily just text to text, but text to audio, text to video, depending on the nature of prompt a soldier would put into the iPad. And as a leader, you would want your soldiers to have this information right there and they're available. And how do
Mhm.
you have a system when you leave the tank depot, the tank is out in the field, it's already been updated. And I think, when you put an edge AI, one other piece of edge AI that we do not have currently, and once that established, edge AI is just a reality once distributed AI comes into play.
Mhm.
Because edge AI is reliable, but edge AI will have so much data that distributed AI is the next level of data centers that you have to have all around the globe, sort of like a cell phone towers, if I may say so, right? So this distributed AI will make edge AI reality sooner than later because that's what we're sort of skipping that edge AI to get to distributed AI, and then edge AI will come along because that's how far the data is. The latency of data is not that far off. For you to have a good decision system that's able to say whatever just-in-time training I have given you is with the most latest up-to-date information that you required, right? Because again, if you're in a tank and you put in the prompt and you've been told the wrong thing, well, I can imagine how a tank commander would feel after they come back to the tank depot,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the nature of what you're thinking about, and I'm super excited about what's happening today and what will come down the pipe.
Right. In terms of organizational application, when you think about a federal or a DoD agency, the first assumption that comes to mind is a top-down command structure. The big guys tell the middle guys who tell the little guys. But in reality, in the tactical space, there is a good amount of latitude given down to the operational units. They are given an objective. Doesn't matter how you get it done, go get it done, right? So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy where you think a stringent organization, top down, everything, but a significant amount of latitude at the execution level. And the example that you gave is an example where edge LLMs will give the latitude at the execution level to do what they do best. They don't have time to go and check up the chain for everything. They have to do what they got to do, right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason this edge LLM kind of sparks my interest. And you're right. Today's computing resources are yet to be up to par to make it a reality across the spectrum versus just some specialized cases. I am kind of also tracking the development of quantum computing on the edge. It's just on my periphery. It's not in my focus yet, because I think that has a good potential of opening this box here as well. But again, I've not dwelled into it. I just know that it's about to break through from theory into material science and into practice. Let's see. Maybe that holds a key as well, along with the distributed AI concept you talked about.
Yeah, the best definition of quantum computing for me, specifically being involved in the AI machine learning world, is that if you want to skip machine learning and get to quantum, I have a bad news for you. Quantum
Mm-hmm.
computing is not going to do anything unless you do machine learning first. So machine learning is sort of that tool set you have to work with in order to have a structured data that quantum computing requires. So I think the first way to visualize is that a data takes a certain path, and every time it finds an obstruction, it comes back to the at ground zero and starts all over again. Whereas in quantum computing, doesn't take a certain path. It takes millions of different paths and tells you there's only one that you can
Mm-hmm.
work with, and that's the one that you have to go with. Because it has optimized all the decision making and it has given you millions of decisions, but the one that's best it's able to come up with instantaneously. But how many times in life do you have to ask a computer about millions of decisions and pick one out of those millions, right? So I think when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to like that capability of what we have today versus what we will have with the quantum computing is sort of like looking at the land and the ocean. You don't need ocean every day, but you definitely have to live in land with technology like binary digital ones and zeros. Where in quantum, it's always entangled more than zeros and ones, right? So it's a different usage. However, we just don't know how that ocean-like technology will impact the land, which eventually will change the whole digital binary world that we've been living in since Alan Turing put it into the motion, right? 70, some 80 years ago. I'm super excited about quantum computing. Quantum computing will definitely happen in my lifetime, and that's what makes me very optimistic about quantum computing because the qubits levels that we're in today, it's been going up incrementally, but I see it growing exponentially in a few years from now. So on that thought process, I think we just talked about that strategic, operational, and tactical folks, right? ERP is the key ingredients for strategic folks to look at the dashboard, pass it on to the operational folks, and the tactical folks have to recreate those data so it goes back to the dashboard again, right? Um, Tell us a little bit about ERP, if not DoD ERP, but specifically ERP wise. What are you thinking? Where's your thought on that as far as AI goes?
Yeah, so ERP is, I guess, now it is considered one of those back office suite of
Mm,
applications, but the implementation that exploit it well understand that ERP is almost like a fabric that spans across your operation. The examples that we talked about earlier, you talked about data flowing throughout a life cycle, right? Now, data by itself doesn't mean anything if you lose the context of how it was produced and who's going to be consuming it next. And so, what is the plumbing for that? ERP is a plumbing for that. So, I use the term, and this is quite common. It's not something I came up with, but factory to foxhole, right? So, in a DoD concept, if a ERP acts as a fabric from the organic industrial base or depots and arsenal down to the foxhole of the units, that's when you have a end-to-end supply chain, and within that supply chain, the fiber of that supply chain is the data, and it's not a downstream upstream. It is it is a optic fiber cable like thing, but the lights are traveling in both directions, right,
that's right.
within the
Yeah.
cable. So that data fiber is enabled by ERPs. Most people just say, oh, ERP gives me this capability. That capability is just a task. But what are you producing out of that? Yes, in the physical world, you are doing something physically, right? In the digital world, you are generating data out of your actions. And nothing valuable will come out of it if that is locked in and
Yes.
not shared across.
Yeah.
So, and that's for the now. Then, what if you're able to exploit the results of your actions to inform your future, right? And we can't do that in our daily lives. We can't inform. I can't inform my future for tomorrow based on some stock research I've done for today. I can take a guess, all right, but you can actually do this well for business systems.
That's right.
because there's a lot of inherent context that you can capture without emotions attached. So that's how I would, in a roundabout way, describe how ERPs are useful in this context.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned the challenge as well, right? Challenge of implementing any sort of AI, if not just implementing a fiber wire, that's your ERP, right?
Hmm.
So when people say AI, I love that GIF about Sundar Pichai saying AI 50 times in less than 30 seconds, right? You can just keep saying AI over and over, but it doesn't necessarily matter unless you have that fiber wire built in already. Just sort of like if you don't have machine learning built in for quantum
Hmm.
computing, your quantum is not going to take you anywhere,
Right.
right? Just like if you don't have your ERP set up, what are you going to do with machine learning? Period. Um, I think there's the challenge here is that the terminologies, the framing of the conversation, and I think you mentioned 18F, right? Method
Hmm.
18F that is being proposed as far as having MLOps, right? Sort of similar to DevOps, but MLOps. And when you have MLOps that is framed correctly by the user, the human-centric AI, the users are mostly digital immigrants and digital natives. What that means is that you have few digital refugees, few people that are negatively impacted by a system of digital, whatever it is, ERP, AI, quantum, however you want to consider it. But even the digital native or the digital immigrants can be negatively impacted by an AI or by a digital system. So I think when we're framing it from digital AI, digital immigrants, and digital native perspective, we have this need of understanding uh, there's just not the business use case, but there's also that ethical implication to it, right? And the ethical implication is sort of something that we have to be educated about, not only just understand our business need, but the need for the societal need, right? AI is a social problem. How do you create a social response to a social problem by educating your workforce, educating your leadership, educating your tactical folks if that's necessary, right? And I believe it encompasses the full area. Like you still have to educate your technical folks because these AIs are growing over time. So I think you mentioned business intelligence. What we're seeing today is artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
And as Nevin Taylor would put it, that after AI comes cognitive intelligence. That's where decision systems are coming into play. It is just not no longer generative AI; it's generating decisions, and those decisions will either benefit or negatively impact the human beings. So tell us, walk us through your thought process about the ethical consideration, because I know there's a worldwide ethical perspective, but what's the perspective in the ERP world?
Yeah, definitely. Ethics and AI is a huge topic, and it's used by both sides. I'm assuming there's two sides to this coin here. One, it's everything is fear of the unknown, and the other, hey, it's just yet another new thing that we need to understand and put mechanisms in place. So we don't know which way is overweighted and which way is underweighted. So let's talk about that 18F method. That website is methods.18f.gov. The concept of human centric design has been around for a while. Has it been followed for a while? Unlikely, especially in the federal space. But I think there is a gradual realization now that any piece of technology for business systems that is not human centric, you're going to spend a lot of time to train people, and your adoption speed is not going to be that high, especially with uh, digital natives. That's the category you put, right? These are our new and upcoming user base or consumers of these products. They have a certain expectation, and if you are deploying solutions like that were 20, that would look okay 20 years ago, you lost them already,
Right.
right? So now the same concept of human centric design can be scaled for human centered AI, as in it does definitely does not imply to say human in the loop, but it's human focused, and that brings in a human. Most humans have ethics and a sense of responsibility. and a sense of trust with other fellow humans and things that they are used to day in and day out. So this 18F method I'm seeing being scaled towards responsible AI, which to me is a better approach than just starting from scratch specifically for AI, right? Because yes, you may maybe address some uniquenesses of AI, but don't forget these other fundamentals. At the end of the day, anything with AI, but specifically with generative AI, it is not the act of producing, but the act of making sure the consumption is done right is what is going to dictate success or failure. It cannot be a technical project.
Uh, you know, I'm always amazed by how difficult it is to keep up with the AI since 2022.
Yep.
Because since 2016, I've been developing AI tools, thinking about incorporating machine learning into whatever it is I design. And I've been baffled by the fact that, these products are worthless unless you have a user base that is aware of how important and why, how, and what of that machine learning capability is. And to your point, to be responsible with AI, since 2022, when ChatGPT came out in November, the explosion that happened in 2023, right, of all these use cases coming online, and all of a sudden I have to keep up with who's doing what with this capability. Um, it's going to be mind-boggling just to see what happens a few years from now, because for 2023 amount of capabilities that we've seen in the pipeline, especially
Mhm.
with Gemini multimodal, and then looking at the text to video capability that Sora has brought online.
Yeah, those are
um,
amazing.
Unreal Engine has been doing this for years. Now what you're doing is incorporating large language model with Unreal Engine. Now Unreal Engine becomes more than just Unreal images or videos, but it becomes surreal, right? As in, why do you need Netflix when I can create my own video in less than 30 seconds with using just a bunch of prompts? So the cross-domain integration, I think that's the ERP's need at this point, because ERPs, they have large language model, they can do text to audio, text to videos, if they capture the right language model and that 20% of the magic sauce that you have to put in was done correctly. I can see in manufacturing, you're able to not use a goggle. I think goggle idea is not something of my favorite, but you have your phone in your hand and you put it up to your face. All of a sudden, you see an augmented reality where everything that you see in front of you is being labeled correctly with high efficiency, right? So, integrating a large language model with augmented reality and having that augmented reality be the ERP system's tactical level information provider, as in instead of a user providing fingerprinted keyboard information, you have an augmented reality that feeds the information because user is able to walk that AR system into where it needs to go. But if you didn't have the human and a person holding the AR system, you had a camera that is highly trained, proficient in identifying what it sees, labels it correctly, and helps to create a better decision system, right? So I think this cross integrations that's happening in the rest of the world, and ERP is no different. But you said earlier that it kind of goes upward. It goes to the strategic folks and really doesn't come back down digitally to the tactical folks. So now we have the full feedback loop that's being generated from, hey, if I feed you information from down below, from up above, you're going to be able to send me some information back, and that's that full feedback loop of decision making system. So having said that, I think there's this need of user understanding, right? As in user, the one that's the tactical folks that are maybe say shop floor, walking around with an AR system or walking around with a digital system that is AI based and like an IoT, educating them, right? Educating them on the fact that, hey, this is how you use this tool, but this is why we need this tool. This is how it interacts with, if you do whatever it is that you have to do, but this is how it interacts once you feed the data into it. What's your thought on that? Like, what do you see as far as the education goes for responsible AI, but also the IoT device that will, provide the data for the AI?
Right. So a couple things in terms of, I mean, education is there, but it's often preceded by use case identification, right? So I'll always remember this conversation that I had with a Gartner analyst on how to bring up use cases, and in this case specifically for AI and generative AI. So most people will approach, and I was guilty of it too until I had that conversation. Like, hey, here you're doing this, and I can help you do the same thing in this much time, right? And
Yes.
you would think, okay, that's a no-brainer, right? That's a value proposition. But
Mhm.
we are missing the human element in
That's right.
that straightforward approach, saying maybe that's a task that this person likes to do,
That's right.
and here you are coming about changing the way that person does things.
That's right.
What, and you think that's the right thing, not for him or her.
Right.
Instead, go and find stuff that nobody likes to do and automate the heck out of it. Or,
Right.
right? So those are the actual low hanging fruit, as
Sure.
in that's, and those are not going to be easy. Low hanging fruit in this case does not mean easy use cases. If things were easy to be done, we wouldn't be required. So that I think breaks the barrier, right? As in you go and identify things that nobody likes to do. Say it's a pain in the butt, it takes away time from them. Okay, now you found those use cases and do it. That partially solves the education problem. People love to learn what they like to do, right? And it's a self-fulfilling circle. The more they do it, the less they need to learn again, and you'll see your adoption cycles go up. So when I'm going out there trying to crawl use cases, I'm trying to stay true to that advice I got from Gartner. Don't try to find what's going to sound good on a ROI scale, or what management wants, and things
Right.
like that, because with each step like that, you're just digging a hole for unmet expectations in the future. But I wanted to go back to what you talked about, what we've seen happen in the last 1 year. There is a book that I stumbled across by this author, Carlota Perez. It came out in 2023, last year. So the title of the book is Technological Revolutions and Financial Capital, in which it's nothing to do with AI, but what she does is does a good job of laying out all the technological revolution, starting from the industrial revolution back in the
Oh,
1770s.
right.
The industrial revolution, age of steam and railway, age of steel, electricity, and mass production, age of oil, automobiles, and this and that. And then, of course, the age that we kind of associate ourselves with, age of telecommunications and internet, right? So with each one of them, there's a pattern, as in stuff pops up, then there is a frenzy, right? And then eventually there's a bubble after every frenzy. And then there is synergy. The survivors of the bubble is synergy. And then things become commodity, like maturity, right? So there are these multiple steps. So without going too much into it, my key takeaway was it took the industrial revolution 26 years to hit the turning point, meaning the bubble and then the takeoff. Steam engines took 19, age of steel 18, age of the oil and automobiles 21 years. Internet and telecommunications, this surprised me because we are all of that generation. 31 years, along with the multiple bubbles, right? The famous dot-com bubble,
Doc.
then the
Right.
financial uh, crisis of 2008, right? Fueled by technology. I mean, all this derivative packaging, this, that, and whatnot, fueled by technology. 31 years before we hit this. Generative
Mhm.
AI, specifically, 4 years. it's hit that spot. And even 4 years is being generous, because the math there is from 2019. There used to be this LLM, the paper for GPT was written, and this and that. But we know when GPT 3.5 came out, that's when the floodgates opened. That's really just 1 year ago.
One
And
year ago.
now that is Sora, right? Or what is that? The new text
Oh,
to,
that's
yeah,
all right. Yeah.
it's unbelievable. Now this is going to put a whole bunch of industries out of work, honestly, right?
Right.
Now there
Right.
is dangers to it too. That video content generation, you said, who needs a Netflix when you can generate your own content? Now we see that today on social media. Based on what you consume, you are in an echo chamber of your own, and you don't know any
Mhm.
better,
That's
right?
right.
So
That's right.
this could accelerate such a
Yeah.
um, echo chamber on
Yeah.
you. Just see and hear what you want to hear,
Yeah.
and you know how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here because if we were just to talk about the use cases, it's such a wide spectrum, right? And then if we were to talk about how these use cases will impact 8 billion population differently, that's another spectrum.
Yep.
So when we're trying to unpack, it's like where do you begin? So Gartner is very right because Gartner are the ones that put out research saying 83% of the AIs that are developed does not deploy. Because before they're
Yep.
deployed, they realize that this return on investment has been nothing short of a legal concern that will come down the pipeline to begin with, right? Or it underperforms. 17% of the AIs that are actually deployed, they underperform. So not everything is Chat GPT, and not everybody is Sora, and not everybody is
Correct.
Hugging Face or open large language model, right? Not everybody's successful in whatever they're working on AI wise. Some are, some aren't, but you're seeing a mushroom like pop ups of products everywhere. Now, as a leader, you have to think like, okay, which one do I even pick? Because first of all, the leaders, specifically the leaders, I would say the C-suite, needs to understand the impact of AI first and how does that impact the rest of the industries outside of that specific industry is a main concern because it only comes down the hill. I don't want to use the wrong word here, just call it a mud bubble, right? It's just
Hmm.
coming down the hill, right? So if you look at the Hollywood industry, you would think, well, it's just a consumer-based entertainment industry. How does that impact everybody else? Well, it does, right? Because whatever Hollywood is able to do CGI wise, that Hollywood's been doing for a very long time, and how does the Hollywood impact the workforce of Hollywood? And then you've seen with the union strike that
Hmm.
hey, unions are striking, say we're not going to work because we cannot guarantee job losses against AI. So these kind of concerns that is coming down where you look at the human finance and industry's perspective in the future, they all have this impact that we have to measure somewhat, right, before we jump into AI use case exactly, right? Because if it's repeatable, redundant, and dangerous, you should start at dangerous, right? That'll be the very first one that will make sense, but you should actually look into the redundant one rather than the repeatable one because some repeatable process is actually very enjoyable for human beings to do,
Exactly.
right?
Because,
You have a redundant process. That's the one you have to say, well, it requires some human supervision, yet it's doable because you have human collaboration with an AI to do the task that is redundant, not necessarily repeatable, right? So repeatable processes are enjoyable. Redundant process, you most likely agree that most people will say, yeah, let's get rid of that one and let AI handle it. But on the other side, people will jump into the dangerous task right away. And that's the sort of impact that leadership, tactical folks, operational folks need to understand that it's not necessarily a dangerous task, it's a redundant task that you should start with first. And I'll give you one example. You walk into a room, you have 50 people. One corner will say, I'm all PhD. All I want to solve is data issue. And you have the other corner of the room that is YouTubers that will say, I just want to create fancy videos and just do all robots. And the other two corners, you can just come up with any scenarios you like. But one scenario that I favor particularly is the Excel sheets, right? That dashboard is created through Excel sheet. You see fancy dashboard and there's Excel sheet somewhere behind it,
hmm
right? So how do you incorporate that Excel sheet into your AI use cases? is the redundant process that I'm talking about. Because if you think about it from a manufacturing shop floor that is not DoD per se, but some manufacturing shop floor have to go through Excel sheets after Excel sheets in order to justify their next 6 months of loan. That is a redundant process that most likely not everybody can enjoy. But if you think about it, it only is one person for a small shop floor that handles that Excel sheet. And if
Hmm.
that person is out sick for that 1 week, your 6 months of loan is out of the way, right? As in you have to wait 3 more weeks to get that done. So you have that Excel sheet use case that I like to always bring up because when it comes to text to text, you see that highly available as soon as you do Google search. Text to audio, text to video, text to something else. Prompt and something else happens, right? What we have to start talking about is that next level of what's coming down the pipeline, the capability wise, which is that how do you talk to your Excel sheet? How do you talk to your PDF? How do you talk to your database? How do you talk to your ERP system information? How do you talk, as in not necessarily text and get an answer, but rather talk, has a communication, and create that as a user experience that you can tackle as use case goes. So I
Absolutely.
think I'm going down
Absolutely.
multiple paths here, but let's pause here and let's hear your thought on
Yeah, so that redundant and repeatable, right? That goes back to what we talked a few minutes ago. Don't go looking for use cases just because think you can solve it. Find those
that. That's
that
right.
nobody likes to do. That's You're spot on about that redundant thing.
Yeah.
Couple other data points, right? If you look at Gartner's, this is February. I think in January they released a report about the top 10 technology trends in the next 5 years. This is not 10 years long or whatever. I mean, there are some few things there that, usual suspects, as in AI, this, AI, that, and whatnot. One of the tiles there was 1000% increase in unionization by 27. That's 3 years from now. There is so much panic out there amongst the content producer type of jobs, script writers, or in entertainment, anything, podcast creators, actually, anything, right? Any content producer's jobs are at risk right now. I don't know how much of it's going to pan out, but what Gartner predicts is a 1000% increase in unionization, which is traditionally not seen in several industry sectors like IT and whatnot. That to me was fascinating, as in, okay, here's a second order effect that maybe organizations are not anticipating. Now, having said that, even Gartner, if you look at their AI magic quadrant, you go back to 2020, there is no mention about generative AI. And if you look at the most recent magic quadrant, of course, they're big, bright, bold letters, generative AI, right? So that's how fast this thing is snuck up on the
Right.
industry, right?
Mhm.
It could be a bubble. Who knows? I mean, the thing about bubbles is when you're in it, you're the most oblivious. So we don't know, but all indicators say no. But that's how bubbles are. Just wanted to go back to two things, two data points that kind of jive with what you were talking about, and definitely agree. Target the redundant stuff. Target the one man critical human type of things,
Right.
right? Now, what's going to happen to that person? That I think that brings in the moral and the ethical dilemma, right? In the public sector, unlike commercial, you cannot easily have a value proposition saying, "I'll save you 2 FTEs by this." Those plans are usually dead on arrival.
Okay.
But in a roundabout way, you are trying to cut down the workload, and that's where the other thing that you brought up about education comes in. Whatever we do with AI, that should not just include educating people on how to use or exploit it, but also upskill the community within your blast radius, if you will, so that they can do other things.
That's right.
Otherwise, they're going to resist at best, sabotage at worst, as we progress through.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up that human in the loop concept, because when you have somebody that does work on Excel sheets, and if you give me an Excel sheet that is total AI, first thing I'm going to do is throw it away
Hmm.
because I have zero trust in AI's ability to understand rows and columns in the context of the content that it's reading. Because Excel sheets are probably a first step of understanding what decisions have to be made, right? Just because you have rows and columns and 400,000 of them, I still don't know. Excel has a limitation of 900,000 rows. So I don't know what other 900,000 that I'm not seeing, right? So with that thought process, I think human in the loop is the critical part of this conversation because when we talk about AI and human collaboration, we look at it from the perspective of humanoid robots and humans, right? Like I said, if you have a room full of 50 people, humanoid robots represents AI to most people, right? Humanoid robots could be just a logic-based system that's working, but if you include AI to it, you start seeing a different sort of activities from that robot, right? Having said AI and human collaboration, I think you need human in the loop as far more than what you would need otherwise. So if you look back some of the reports that said back in the days from the UN is that 87 million jobs will be replaced by an AI,
Hmm.
right? Or an AI system. But in order to respond to the 87 million job losses, we will need 93 million new types of job in order to address that AI taking over those jobs, right? So that's a
So
whole nother categories and titles of jobs that will come into the play. And yeah, I'll
that
stop there.
switch is always going to be hard, right? So it's not
It's a
you're
slow
switching jobs; it's
right,
some going away and some coming in. Where did I read this? Fortune magazine.
right.
So far this year, we're just in month number two, right? So far this year, 4,600 jobs have been lost, not lost, like eliminated
Right.
um, by various companies. Late last year, IBM stated the obvious, saying we are going to cut jobs because we anticipate a lot of jobs being redundant. Again, going back to the word you used, a lot of jobs being redundant in the context of AI. They faced a severe backlash. They're still going about their game plan. SAP has cut quite a few jobs, thousands.
8,000. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So again, can everything be pinpointed to AI? No. Are companies using AI as an excuse? Probably yes. But there is that in between where reality exists, that where a lot of redundant things can go away. Now that does bring other aspects. All right, let's say you are an airline, and this actually happened with I think it's Alaska Airlines. You're an airline and you're like, I have these 10 call center people that can be phased out by a chatbot, right? And so that AI driven chatbot, we know there's not much AI there, but anyway, they call it AI chatbot going back and forth. So what a customer did was he tricked the chatbot, um, because these so far the current generation of LLMs and GPTs have a tendency to try to please humans that tend to agree with you. You can bait them a little bit. So this customer, he I don't know if it's a he or she, but this customer talked the chatbot into a specific airline fare that was not authorized, right? And of course, when it went to the next level, that interaction was denied. There's a lawsuit. Actually, it's Air Canada. That's why it's not Air Alaska, it's Air Canada. It's a lawsuit where the chatbot is held liable
That's right.
for the business decision, right? The defense Air Canada tried to do was, hey, it's a tool. It doesn't represent the views of our company. What? You are responsible for that decision, except you're not going to be able to go and fire somebody and just get away from it, right? So I think therein comes in the challenge, and we're going to probably see more and more of those.
Yeah, integration is a funny business, actually. System integration, AI integration, whatever integrations you have, is a funny business, and it's probably the most difficult part of the bubble, right?
Hmm.
Because in order for the bubble to burst and for everything to settle down to the ground, you have to have these use cases that sticks out and say, okay, these are the anomalies that we have to address. And I will specifically talk about chatbot here, if that's the main concerns that everybody has these days, because they're looking to adopt, but they're thinking, well, we can tweak that, we can work around that. We put some human behind the screen and say, as the chat is happening, these humans are keeping an eye on the chat to say, do not let this happen. Or you can fine tune the parameter, quantize it in a way that if this sort of conversation comes up, stop talking, right? Start giving away the chat GPT
Hmm.
response, sort of like, I can't do that, right? Hail from Space Odyssey 2001 sort of things.
Hmm.
But here's another part of it, and it doesn't stop there, because there's a very simplistic approach to that process. Is that if you put bit 64 language in Chat GPT or some of the large language model, it doesn't matter what kind of parameter you put into it. Bit 64 language will literally talk system to system, and there is no parameter for that. Well, at least not that one that we can scalably deploy in order to prevent that from happening. So this kind of poisoning of data, this sabotaging of data, this understanding of how your business logic will be impacted, and how much loss you have, how much return on investment you're looking down the 5-year life cycle. These concerns are just tip of the iceberg, right? Anybody who's been in the business realm can deal with this. But then you have AI subject matter experts that will come in and specifically identify these discussions for you and have you kind of sit back and think about, what does that mean redundant, and how many more other use cases can I find? And questioning is what drives your success. 83% of the AIs do not deploy this because they're not successful in deployment.
Hmm.
17% that does deploy, they're not even successful even in the production environment. So you have all these concerns you have to walk through. And these days, I think the first thing everybody's talking about is just jump in. Well, even for jumping in, you need to know what it is that you're wearing.
Right.
Right? Yeah, yeah, cool. Let's jump in. But you got all your gears on, electric gear. You have a toaster oven that's connected to the electric grid, and you're jumping in. Please don't jump in, right? Back in 2019-ish, when I was doing vulnerability assessment, I told people, like, look, Tesla did not come about full self-driving just because you saw it yesterday, right? Full self-driving capability has been worked through, and I'll give you the same example that I did with chatbots for last since 2012 at minimum, right? And they're still improving. But one of the part was human in the loop, as in every interaction that full self-driving capability was interacting in the real environment, there was a human who was monitoring and triggering what needed to happen as far as the response came, right? So if you look at Nissan back in before ChatGPT hype, they were talking about, we will have actual human being on call if the car needed to be re-steered because there's a construction on the road.
Mm.
What if you run into the construction and it's not the you know picturesque construction that we think of, but it's actual construction that the car has to navigate around it. So there will be another human that is on the call that will take over that steering. So you have all this full self-driving capabilities, but if you think about the human in the loop in it, how long it takes you to deliver those full self-driving, it's not a matter of months, and that hasn't changed yet. All the hype cycle that you've seen in last year, that does not change any of these. You have some use cases that you can engage with very fast and rapid. Air Canada, for example, and you like a Wisconsin dealership, they're using it, and somebody made the Chat GPT agree that Tahoe
Yeah.
that is brand
One
new will
dollar,
cost.
right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's the
So
same thing.
you have all
They're
this,
manipulating
all
the
these things are
chatbot.
happening, but you have to kind of sit and pause and think about, okay, when I say redundant or dangerous, how redundant is it, and what sort of human FTEs do I need in order to have this technology deployed? Does it operate 24 hours a day? Do I need to just have it scale for 4 hours a day, and eventually, as I have, and this is the AI term, high confidence and most accuracy, right?
Mm.
Because error is part of the AI future. It's not necessarily a bug. AI is built with a fault in it. It has the error piece built into it. It's a matter of, how do I take it from 70% to 80% error rate to 90% or 99.9%? But it will always have an error built into it. So with this thought process, I think people have to approach with caution, and humanoid robots is just around the corner. All the things that we're talking about right now, we will have to interject humanoid robot down the road. So maybe we'll do that on our next podcast. I think we're running short on time, but I think it's an exciting time, but you have to navigate just as carefully as you did with Y2K. as you do with the dot-com bubbles, as you do with financial crisis in 2008. All of it has to have some visions behind it, and that vision can be reverse engineered to today's date, and we can start today. But it is a slow process, not a fast one.
Absolutely. So, a final couple things. Whenever find myself getting too excited, with this occasional news thing popping up or new break like this Sora thing that I saw, I'm like, wow, all right. I go to this website, incidentdatabase.ai. That is a curated database of all negative incidents that were second order, third order, uh, uh, impacts of AI. And this the Chevy dealer, the $1 case is in there in that incident AI database. And then there are some serious things like you heard about this CFO in Hong Kong got. I mean, his voice was used
Oh,
to initiate millions of dollars of transaction. I mean, that takes these phone scams to a whole new level, right? And then something much more tactical, like the Chicago Police Department was using AI, where the signals were coming in from mounted sensors to anticipate which direction a gunshot that was heard is coming from.
triangulate.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So that they can send a response team earlier than before for address a shooting incident. However, the AI model was faulty or whatever. It ended up misleading them half the time, or not even recognizing that they were shooting. So those kind of highlight the dangers of relying on something that you don't understand. You
Yeah.
don't you can't tackle what you don't see, right?
That's right.
So then the last point I wanted to make was, of course, all this is you got to approach with caution and this and that. Now, I do admire the DoD's willingness to take this on and setting guardrails in place. So the DoD has published a toolkit for responsible AI. If you Google DoD Task Force Lima Responsible AI Toolkit, you'll see it. And of course, like any DoD artifact, there's tons of things, right? Um, Good luck to you to getting to the end of it. But for sure, there is a mechanism to safeguard from irrational exuberance, to quote Alan Greenspan from the dot-com days, right? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but at least at the same time, make sure we don't get left behind. So where's that balance?
That's
Um, Last but not least, Asif, I think your cohort system of getting military vets spun up, you shared the program with me earlier today, the data science classes and things like that. I think that is critical in getting the people who have real world, real field experience and seeing how their actions can result in data and how to then harness the data to make something bigger out of it. That chain is all that is what synergy is, right? You take two and two and make it five instead of just four. That's pretty commendable what you guys are doing. I applaud you for that.
Thank you so much. It's definitely a work that we will continue. We will have three more cohort this year, and the demand for it has peaked. So, how to address that demand throughout, not just in the veterans community, military community? How do we integrate the rest of the DoD workforce is yet to be seen. I'm looking forward to those days where everybody has that baseline understanding of AI, just similar to we understand how internet works these days.
Hmm.
So, Amit, I know it's Sunday and you made the time to join because I believe you see the priority here, and that's what me and
Absolutely.
you have been talking about, the priority of these topics to get in front of people. So for us to educate through a podcast with a conversation like this where we can jump from topic to topic has been amazing and fascinating for me. So thank you so much for making the time for AyAyAyAi.
Absolutely, my pleasure, and thank you for having me, Asif. Enjoy. Tomorrow is a holiday for you, right? Just like the
Exactly.
rest of the country. Okay.
Well,
All right.
when you're in a startup, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. We're working 24
Thank
by
you.
7. All right. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.